I know some of you are going to find this difficult to believe, but one of my pet peeves is the oft-repeated absurd claim of the highly visible drug policy reformers such as Ethan Nadelman and Peter DeFazio, my congressional representative, that the drug war is a total failure. This is pure nonsense. I'm a history major. I know history. And drug prohibition has a long history spanning over many, many centuries. And in every single case, the result was that the nation that practiced it experienced much higher increases in drug use, drug abuse, drug addiction, toxic drugs, crime, violence, public corruption, and social disintegration. These results and outcomes are so consistent that it must logically be assumed that these are the desired outcomes of nearly everybody in the congressional delegation, including the two U.S. Oregon senators, along with the entire law enforcement community of Benton County, plus every single member of the Philomath School Board and every single minister who preaches within the greater Philomath area. Now, Mr. Nadelman and Mr. DeFazio, since these are the gold standards for success in drug war, wouldn't you agree that today's drug war in the United States easily meets and exceeds all these standards favored by so many esteemed people within Benton County and the nation as a whole? And shouldn't it be declared a success of epic proportions? Now, you may disagree upon the desirability of all the outcomes that are favored by so many esteemed people and all the media outlets. But that brings up the question, why would anybody deliberately impose such a pestilence upon the American public? You only have to go back to the Middle Ages during another pestilence, which is arguably significantly more damaging than the war on drugs, called the bubonic plague. Those who did survive this plague, which killed from 1/3 to 1/2 of the population of Europe, emerged with control of a greater amount of wealth and resources, because they didn't have to share it with as many people. Believe it or not, the drug war has similar motivations. Every single episode of drug prohibition has always coincided with a period of social unrest, with a highly visible bunch of critics who are bringing out a lot of the criminal misconduct of people in power. Now, what the drug war does, or drug prohibition does, is it does three things. First, it shifts the attention from the actual misconduct and the criminal misconduct of those in power to drugs, and specifically to the drugs being used by a lot of the critics. Not only that, but secondly, it allows them to marshal public resources to directly attack and enforce those drug restrictions on those critics and any and all possible constituencies for those critics and the criticism. And third, and probably the most obvious reason, is it allows people who are the criminals in charge, basically criminally oriented people, to make extra money to fund other criminal enterprises. Because let's face it, that's the only people who really gain in a drug war are people who are criminally oriented. Now, that brings, since this is a success, that brings up the problem, you might want to rephrase it and say that you disagree with the outcomes, the desired outcomes of all these people. I mean, what kind of person, besides a criminal, would actually deliberately impose these type of outcomes upon their constituents? Now, I can understand Mr. DeFazio's reluctance. After all, he has to work with a lot of these criminals. He's going to anger them greatly if he starts questioning the criminal motivations of all those people who support the drug war. They might, since they have access to so much of this ill-gotten gains, they might heavily fund a candidate to beat him out of office. Or they could bring new drugs to the district, including maybe the newest drug scourge, and impose that on his district and blame his soft on drugs approach to crime that goes on in his district. What I don't understand is why does Ethan Nadelmann give them a free ride? I mean, after all, this is a deliberate policy that is deliberately imposed by our leaders that produces the very same results that these guys who masquerade as law and order candidates are railing against. They caused it. Why isn't Nathan Nadelmann bringing up the crime, violence, and all these social pestilences that the drug war causes?